Hello everyone, this is week 5 individual project. This is Kim Bundy or K Bundy. Sometimes I get lazy and I don't type the KIM, but this is my presentation. The history of the forensic wheel. Digital investigations of mobile phones used to consist of Polaroid photographs of the evidence. Phones gradually evolved and became more advanced, calling for investigation techniques to also evolve. This can be proven with the invention of instant messaging, text messages. The phones from the 80s did not have apps, so like the presentation says, when the phones evolve, investigation techniques must also evolve. Reports went from being generated physically with a typewriter to being generated digitally using a word processing software. This means that people had to be extra careful with Word documents and digital documents. So not only do they have to worry about papers being destroyed, but now computers. So that's more protocols that were needed to be implemented, which is like lab rules, sign-in sheets, everything. Security had to be up for these reports. So despite the ever-changing realm of mobile forensics, consistent protocols were still required. This helped keep everything on track and avoid messes, which could literally be disastrous for an investigation. So keep organized, keep with the rules, have a protocol or any of the consistent protocols used for years in place. Significance of the final report. It is important to record and summarize the entire process of the investigation. It is like showing one's work. It illustrates how the investigation had reached their conclusion to their investigation. You have to record every step in full detail, generalized. And you got to put it in layman's terms. Do not use any of that jargon, because not only will experts be reading it, but also cops or investigators or other people involved who do not have the same IT background as you. So something may make sense to you, but it's not going to make sense to them. So you got to put it in simple terms. It just makes it easier for everybody. Every step must be recorded. This can be how evidence is stored. Was it in a lab? Was it touched? Is there a sign-in sheet for the lab? Is the lab open or is it closed? Is there key cards? You got to put this down. Who handled the evidence? Where was the evidence found? Etc. Oops. Hold on a minute. Okay. What is the initial contact? An investigator must explain how they began the investigation. How did you enter into the story? How did you get there? Did you just randomly walk in, said, oh, hey guys, what's up? It's a crime scene. Or did you literally take your sunglasses off and pretty much say, hey, I'm an investigator. I was brought in to help you guys out. I'm an expert. Or not an expert and you're just some cool guy with a thing of sunglasses. Either way, you got to write down how you got there. When did you start the investigation? When do you come into this story? This can be achieved by answering the who, what, when, where, why questions. Who are you? What are you doing? When were you doing said? What were you doing? Where were you doing it? And why? Like I said, are you an expert? Or are you just some random guy with sunglasses who just walks in and then who starts playing? And just saying, you got to put this in. Just do it. Explain qualifications and why one was called to the investigation. This will demonstrate a proper authority and legitimize anything an investigator says to a court of law. This is also called expert opinion, and this will definitely solidify your evidence and your case if the facts are coming from someone who has a background in the relevant field. Nobody wants to hear opinions from someone who does not have an IT background presenting IT evidence. You have to literally show if you have qualifications or not. Technical aspect of a report. One of the first aspects of beginning a report is to describe in what condition the device is. This can also be called describing what state the device is when it is first examined. Now, when it means state, it means, was it turned off? Was it turned on? Did you isolate it from the network so whoever the suspect is can't just go on another phone and just remotely wipe out the data that's on the phone, which you can do. You can do it with iPhones. And that's why most people put phones in bags or in any way to make sure the network can't touch it. If it's not on that network, there's no way they can remotely remove that data. It's a very important thing to consider when you're digitally investigating a phone. The investigator must explain how the device was handled and what was used to handle it. So, did you put it in a bag? Did you use a box? Did you use a mesh? You gotta put these down. Who handled it? Did any of the cops that do not have a digital background handled it? Was the person who handled it first qualified? You gotta put this down. You gotta put it on detail in layman's terms. Because, again, not everybody has a digital background like you do. You got to consider some people are not going to know what volatile data is or anything like that. They're not going to know. They're not going to know about the physical data. It's things you have to consider. Explain where the device was sent and where it was handled and when it was handled. This means, was it sent to a precinct? Was it sent to a lab? You have to write this down. It's important. If it was sent to a precinct and improperly handled and you lost volatile data, then that needs to be put down so people can know, like, hey, why is this evidence that was here, why is it not there anymore? Gotta put it down. And I'm saying that a lot, but you gotta put this stuff down. It's important. This is the whole point of a report, is literally keep in check everything, keep organized, and show how you got there. It's basically like showing your work on a math quiz. You gotta show your work, or the math teacher's gonna get mad at you if you don't. It's just how it is. Answering a general list of questions. When creating an investigative report, the investigator should ask questions that are relevant to the case. These questions should pertain to the device involved, the location of said device, who handles it, and how and why the investigator is handling it. These questions can help develop a draft of what kind of information to seek during the investigation. So basically, plan these questions out beforehand because it will help you keep in mind what exactly you're wanting to look for. Because when you encounter a large collective of data, you're not going to exactly specifically know what you need to look for. You're going to be probably overwhelmed by how much info you've just gathered from this mobile device. And due to that vastness of this data, you're going to miss important details. So this is kind of like a draft. You do ask general questions on research projects and papers and PowerPoints, and they are meant for this certain purpose. It keeps you on track. It shows a certain goal that you want to achieve with your investigation. It's important to have these questions. Examples of general questions. How did you find the device? Was any DNA found on the device? Who owned it? How is the device stored? Like I said, was it in a lab? Was it in the precinct? Was it in a bag, the boxes, or the mesh to keep it from the network? Did you cut it off from the network? A lot of these questions pretty much pertain to protecting volatile data that can be easily erased if it's not cut off properly or if the phone is not handled properly in an investigation. Has the device been turned on recently? Was the device, like I said, isolated from the network? Volatile data questions, because if I was in an investigation, the top priority would be the most trickiest and fragile data / evidence. I would go for that first because you never know what's going to happen in an investigation, and it's better to get the stuff that's most breakable first. It's just common sense. Documenting initial issues. If the investigation requires the gathering of non-digital evidence, but physical evidence like fingerprints, DNA, swabs, etc., then it should be noted who did the gathering and when a physical data gathering was required in the report. Sometimes there's bloodstains on the phone or glass shatter prints. It's the same thing with ballistics. You never know, and you're going to need to bring in someone from that specific field to investigate and properly gather data. It's good to have someone from that field do that because it'll solidify the evidence later on. Fingerprints and bloodstains can happen even on mobile phones. It's not all about digital forensics when it comes to phone forensics. Explanation of strategies, tools, and versions. List the tools, methods, and utility that was utilized to gather information during the investigation. Explain the brand and version of the tool and a brief summary of the tool. Sometimes certain versions of a tool or software may have some feature that will jeopardize or help an investigation. This will help solidify the findings in a court of law. So when you want to explain tools, strategies, or versions, like specifically with software, and I'm saying this for the free open source software because I use that a lot, it's always subject to change. These tools that are free and open source change on a daily basis, and sometimes they update without you even knowing. It doesn't help that the source code is also open to the public, so that just makes the possibility of change even more likely. Validation and its significance. All findings need to be validated. All evidence and methods used to gain said evidence must be done lawfully and scientifically. Lawyers in court are always trying to find a way to discredit evidence. They are not there to let justice reign. Sometimes they're there to make sure that they help their client win a court case. That's their job, to win a court case, to work with what they have and try to fight back what they don't have. Ensuring everything is sound will help avoid such a phenomenon. You got to make sure your evidence is as solid and validated as possible. It's like a research paper. You got to make sure that your works are cited. You got to make sure that the research materials are vetted for biases, and you got to make sure that you avoid misinformation at all costs because it will literally destroy you. Formats that reports are saved in: text reports. These are like Word documents. HTML can contain media files, media disks, which are, in my opinion, a little bit old school, but they exist, CDs, DVDs, or Blu-ray discs. PDF can allow documents like search warrants to be sent and viewed securely. And these are my references. That was my presentation, and thank you.